The following is a conversation with the artist Rebecca Sangster, recorded to accompany a show here at Caustic Coastal. In it, we talk about her time at Camberwell together, her work at Damien Hirst studio at Science Ltd, her time in the Contemporary Art Theory course at Goldsmiths, and some of the thinking around the exhibition we produced. I've included timestamps, so feel free to skip around or ahead depending on what you want to hear, but equally stick around for the whole conversation. And don't forget to check out the exhibition videos, along with the accompanying install videos, which I'll link up here.
So maybe first let's talk about where we went to uni and how we met, and maybe the first question might be about why you chose the painting course at Camberwell, which is where we met, and then let's go from there.
I think because, when I applied to the Camberwell, I was probably about, 21? And I think at that time, painting was all I'd kind of done. I wasn't really much of a sculptor. And I was doing these, actually looking back, quite awkward self-portraits in oil painting. So I kind of reckoned myself as a bit of a painter. I felt like I could do a skilled painting. Whether that made for good art or not, I probably would say not, definitely at the time. So when I applied to a few different unis, and a mix, some which had painting as a separate course, like painting, sculpture, drawing, like at Camberwell, and then others which were more, which just fine art was encapsulated in all of them. And yeah, I chose Camberwell, I think, more than just the painting course, because I feel like it was it's quite a small college, right? But it felt quite intimate, and the kind of students that they'd had there before aligned with kind of painting work I'd done, which is more, I suppose, photorealistic. I said my practice was generally photorealistic stuff. And yeah, it just kind of felt like a fit. I think there was also other colleges like Wimbledon that I applied to, and I think the painting course that's fantastic, but it was, I think also it was quite far away, and I kind of wanted, Camberwell at the time felt quite far away, but it was, wanting to feel a little bit more like I was in London, but not bang in the centre like St Martin's.
Because I think I got into Wimbledon, I got into Camberwell, and then there was a few others that we shan't mention that I didn't get into.
I know. I'll say I applied twice for the Slade, and I really liked the Slade.
Yeah, I applied.
And they didn't take me, and I now understand why.
Yeah,
I wasn't very good. I just was not ready for the Slade, which isn't to put anything down on Camberwell. I just feel like Camberwell had that painting course, and because I was a painter, I've kind of fitted well in, and the course that's fantastic. People have come out of the painting course at Camberwell are doing some incredible stuff. Yeah. Saying that, you probably remember I didn't paint.
Yeah, so then that's the kind of thing. It's funny because we all go into the painting course, and then I stopped painting pretty much in first year. I don't know when you stopped painting, but I feel like everyone goes into it and paints, and then kind of either stops immediately or stops within the first year and kind of reassesses their whole outlook on life and art, or kind of carries on and really digs down into painting. And I suppose because you were making, I remember you showing me a competition thing you'd won when you were 16 or something, where you hyper-realistic portrait of yourself or something. I can't remember.
So self-indulgent.
And I suppose it's those things where you go from really highly skilled technical painting, and then because you go up to such a level where it's kind of, I suppose everything's easy. You kind of paint anything at a certain point, or not anything, but you feel like you can paint anything realistically, which is sometimes when you're younger feels like the goal. But then it kind of gets boring because you're sort of I can do this, and it's just you're repeating technique quite a lot.
Yeah. I felt like I needed to really knock it out of me. Yeah. I fully rejected painting. Yeah.
So when did you stop? When did you stop painting?
Well, I kind of, the first year, and this is also foundation elsewhere, I totally stopped. I think in first year I was doing loads of paper marbling and stuff. I was really happy with paper marbling, and at the time there was I don't know, this kind of pseudo spiritualist thing going on in art where people were what was his name? The artist that did a performance at Elephant Castle, dressed up as a deer head on his. I have a poster of his at home.
I know what you mean.
We'll find out. We'll edit that in.
Link down here.
But and kind of like ultra modern kind of like stuff. And so going to that and doing like sort of like performance work, but really like just really awkwardly like rejecting painting because I didn't know quite what to do with it or how to work out of the like photorealism.
Did you find it was quite like, I suppose, did you find the subject, like what you were painting?
Yeah,
the problem?
like why?
Yeah.
Like,
so I suppose when you're younger, it's like the thing, like I remember doing at A-levels, like you're just painting yourself and stuff like that, which is kind of boring, but it's easy material to paint.
Yeah, it's like it's good if it looks like the, you know, if your mum likes it, it looks like the paint, it looks like the picture. And like that is unsatisfying. And as you go to art school and you start meeting all these incredible like other artists and having lectures and the students you're studying with, the kind of diversity of thought, which wasn't there when I was like at school, you know, or like kind of like.
And everyone's questioning like everything, every decision you're making to the point where you like have a crisis every day.
Yeah, and I mean, I think now I came back to painting a little bit in second year, more for like a bigger practice, also doing like sculptural stuff, whatever. But I didn't really get back into it until leaving uni and kind of embracing it again. Yeah. And being less self-conscious about it. I think there was a lot of pressure to be, I don't know, to make something that was, I don't know, not painting or like not what I could do, because it felt like either not a challenge or I was kind of lost with it. And then coming back to it after uni, I mean, fairly recently, to be honest, in the last kind of couple of years. Yeah. And just really enjoying it, like liking, kind of settling into it and like liking what I'm doing and having, I think, it's something about the kind of breadth of life experience as well that comes like after
I think that liking thing though is quite an interesting one, where it's like you don't feel like you like it at uni, like you don't feel like you like making artwork because every decision is so stressful and everyone's questioning everything you're doing.
Although people at Camberwell were pretty tame. Like,
they were pretty
no
tame,
one was very like.
I think they were pretty tame. But it was that thing of people. Like I found after uni, making paintings, I enjoyed it again because no one's like questioning every decision I'm making. But then it kind of moves back into that framework of a hobby, which it starts out with when you're younger and then moves into like maybe this is professional, and actually sometimes that move to professional ruins it for people, and that's in all things like music and art and, you know, theatre and stuff, where the professionalization of it kind of removes the magic and fun of why you did it in the first place, and then it's trying to then like refine that again, like after like somewhere where you're being critiqued every day, not every day, but like, you know, like every week at least. For
me, it was like finding the reason I was doing it again, because the art world kind of inverted commas is quite intense. If you do feel like you're being watched all the time, or if you feel like you're important to be watched all the time, and maybe out of uni I was like, I want to be important, to be observed enough, you know, and so I felt that my work was quite pressured, even though no one cared about what I was making, no one was looking at what I was doing, but it felt quite intense. It had this like weight, you know, if I'm going to be an artist, whatever that is, then this has to be important. And you know, over the years that drifts away in a way that actually I'm now comfortable doing my own stuff. And I suppose like you, because you've been doing paintings and so you know,
like hobby paintings that I don't show you.
So I don't think, you know, I don't know if, I think that the border between hobby and like whatever professional is kind of really hazy. And I think there's a kind of professionalization of it where I don't really want to get to the point where I'm doing something like professionally. I think there's a lot of connotations of that with like, I don't know, like with work, with like efficiency, or with like, you know, trying to be like something of like an accepted like economically viable human being in contemporary society. And actually hobbies are more, you know, a hobby or not, I think if it's more like it's for yourself. For other people as well, like it's like, you know, a generous thing, but it's not it's kind of like, it has more of a view to like, I don't know, it's more generous when it's like your own personal thing, like a hobby is personal. And if that is what my artwork ends up,
and there can be a lot of mistakes with a hobby, and there can be a lot of like things that you don't show people, or sometimes in like especially in an art school studio, it's a very open environment, which is also kind of like a competitive environment, even though like some people disagree with this idea, but like it's this kind of like gladiatorial arena where everyone's making like bigger stuff, more impressive stuff, more technically detailed stuff.
Or like that bit of concrete that we...
Big bits of concrete, like stupid things that are like, you wonder sometimes if, and I don't mean like you, but as in like other people are making things because they want to make it, or because they're in that kind of public, semi-public framework of an open studio, which you make like, I definitely make different paintings now because I'm at home, and it's like, one is the size, but also like they're just like things that I'll kind of dip in and out of, and I know no one's going to see them ever, so it's like, who cares? But it is that kind of like gladiator vibe of like, I'll make a big painting, I make a bigger painting, and then I've got linen, I've got, you know, canvas, and it's stretched by whoever, etc.
Well, yeah, you know, everything becomes so pressured. I think it's also that, you know, a lot of, you kind of go into art school and you come with your own kind of perception of what art and being an artist is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of myths around like the art world, art professionalism, artists, like what a kind of life of an artist is, and it does have this kind of shine to it, this kind of, you know, drop from heaven perfect kind of image of what a person is, which isn't the case. I don't think, in my experience of like, you know, like post uni and then working in like in the arts, it's a lot less precious, and I think there is also this like move generally. I'm seeing a move towards like stuff that would have maybe been considered more like hobby-ish, and it's not though, but it's like made important. I think a lot of students, and I definitely had this impression of the art world as this like monolith of like just pristine personalities and hyper competitiveness. Like the best artist is the person that makes I don't know, makes the most money or the most like great press, or like I don't know what it would be. And I've become a lot more generous to myself and to like, and just generally about like what art is and what it isn't.
Yeah, and often those things are like the things that you can't control as well. It's like the money, the kind of viewership, the galleries and the representation, all the things you can't control. And the only thing you can control is your artwork. But people really often, like, especially when you're at uni, you care about those things that are uncontrollable more than like the things that you can control. And I suppose because it feels out of control, you want to, I don't know, try and tame it or something.
It all feels so alien and so unattainable. And I don't mean like, you know, everyone can like attain being some superstar artist, but it's just like those little things, like approaching galleries, speaking to people. I think speaking to people, like speaking to artists and realizing that they're not, or like just people that make art, really, like anyone that makes kind of something creative, and realizing that they're not these just intensely kind of cold characters. Obviously there are some people that are like that, but everyone that I've ever most people that I've worked with or spoken to or like had exhibitions with or like in my like work environments as well has been a lot more just personable and human than I think the kind of shine of the art world would have you believe, I think.
So when you're at uni, do you think like what was your kind of, let's say in third year, like going out of uni, what was your kind of ideal or idea of what you would be doing as soon as, not as soon as you left, but maybe like your long-term 5-year, 10-year goal that you wanted to get to?
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely felt like, right, a third year's coming, a degree show's coming, everyone's going to be there. There's going to be some soiree, everyone's going to look at my work, love it, and then I'm going to be like
boom,
buying it, and there's, you know, it's going to be incredible, I'm just going to rise. But that, like, obviously doesn't happen. Like, it just doesn't happen. And if it does happen to people, I think it's a lot of their own, there is a proactiveness there. Like people that I know who have like gone on and done shows and done really well. Yeah. It's not because someone, you know, spots you from a distance and is like, I'm going to take you under my wing and like gather you up and make you this, that, the next. It's that person like speaking to galleries, as
Yeah.
shows, making. I hate the word connections. It's more like community.
Yeah.
And I was never necessarily that good at that, and I wouldn't even necessarily say I am now. I'm a lot more confident approaching people at galleries or whatever, but not. I'm not that person that can be like, right, I'm doing this, that, the next, and then, you know, asking for like 5-10 year plans. I don't know. I think half the success was just the idea of being able to stay in London, because that was where I'd studied, but also because I didn't necessarily want to go home, and I don't have connections elsewhere in like England or well, like UK generally. So just being able to stay, have a studio, make work. And I've been quite lucky, because for the most, like, that has like been what happened.
That's worked out.
That's worked out, but you know, skin of my teeth kind of stuff. Yeah. Because you know, London is, you know, no news to anyone. It's not the most hospitable place for making art anymore. I don't think it's expensive.
So if you had that goal of like stay in London, make work, then what is the
be famous?
Be famous. But what is so? What is the next like step after that? Because I suppose like it's not easy. That's not two things that are not necessarily easy to do, because a lot of people don't stay in London and don't still make work after uni. So that's two goals that are quite hard to kind of attain. But then what was then from there? Like make work and do what with it, or just make work and not do anything with it?
I think, and like I was joking about the be famous thing. I think it's more just I just wanted to create kind of something that resembled like a sustainable living scenario. You know, and the practicalities of life after uni do, you know, make that the priority. Like, where is my next job going to be? Where's work actually going to come from? Where am I going to live? Who am I going to live with? How much is my rent going to be? And can I afford it? So and if you have a studio as well, because I was quite lucky. I had a studio after I left. So I used to work in an art shop in Camberwell, and above there is studios, and I just like happenstance managed to find this really cheap studio. But even then, that wasn't necessarily sustainable like for the long term, because it was money going out, and I was working full time. So this was initially after leaving uni, worked in some, you know, like various like offices and like admin kind of stuff, and then ended up working for Science Ltd, which is Damien Hirst's studio. Yeah.
So let's go to then. As when was that? What was the gap between uni and Science Ltd?
Actually, mercifully short. I think it was. What year did we leave? 2014.
2014. Yeah.
So it was the end of 2015, I think.
Like a year and a half.
A year and a half.
Which is still a long time of.
It's a long time when you don't know what's
happening. I'm not saying you didn't have a job, but you know you were working at the.
I was working at different places. I was working part-time in an art shop. I also did like part-time work in a couple of offices, and then was an administrator for a design studio. I can't do that. I can't do the environment like very well, and I find it quite difficult to take work seriously when someone else is like really precious about something that I just fundamentally don't care about. And I don't care about timesheets. I don't care about
Gary, I love the Excel documents.
I don't care about pretending to work in front of a screen for you know what 9 till 6 every day, and then commuting back and then trying to get into the studio was kind of impossible. But yeah, so it was kind of a mercifully short amount of time, and it was luck to some extent that I saw the advert. It was publicly advertised kind of in the Guardian, I think, and that.
So Science Ltd, for people who might not know, is Damien Hirst's studio, production studio, and that it makes everything, or it makes specific things.
Well, that's the kind of production wing of, I think, of Damien Hirst at large. So there's other kind of sides to, I don't know, his company, his business. And it's changed, come and gone over the years. Different things have kind of popped up, but that's the production bit of it. So there's a studio, and this is, you know, I'm limited to what I can say. It's just what's kind of in the public realm. Anyway, I don't even think I can say like what I actually made.
Yeah.
Which is
so
kind of frustrating.
So let's start from like when you saw the job in The Guardian, and then you applied, blah blah, and then so what was the interview?
I can probably say that.
Surely you need some skills to kind of work for Damien Hirst.
So at this point, I still hadn't painted since before uni. So I did a little bit of painting in second year of uni, but before that was when I was like doing all these like photorealistic portraits of myself, which, for the love of God, I hope
they don't resurface.
Gone, scrap from the world. My mum has them, so like a couple of them. So yeah, they're to the world, thankfully. But so it was. So yeah, I saw the advert, and then was in my studio and just spent an evening just kind of trying to remember how to paint. I had no idea what they were going to ask of me. Actually, I had some inclination because a friend had applied for the job before and unfortunately didn't get it. But so I knew in the rough rounds what was going to happen. So it was I was basically sat in front of a photo. Next, and then a canvas on an easel next to me, and I had to kind of transfer one over to the other. Painting photo, like
the whole thing, or like you had a limited time to do something.
A bit of it. Well, yeah, I think what I can say is that I was a photorealistic painter when I was there. So for reference, there's I think on his website there's a drop-down menu somewhere with all the different kinds of like sections of his practice, whatever. And it's called fact painting. Facts.
So they were like, if I remember rightly, they're the what, like this? Yeah, they're like photos basically that he replicates, and they're sort of is it like what they're called, like?
I think there's butterflies.
Dead bodies and.
Oh yeah, there's some like medical ones. I'm just trying to remember what's on the website because I can't say what I actually did. But there's medical stuff.
And like skulls that are sort of. Realistic, maybe
some skulls that are realistic. Yeah, it's a mixed bag. There's some butterflies as well. I remember those being on there. Because I can't say exactly what I worked on, but broadly just like photorealistic painting, big and small. And
would you do that in like you do one painting alone, or would it be a mixed set of people working on one painting? Or I suppose because technique might change, you can't have mixed.
People, I think, generally across the studio as well. So we chopped and changed with, so I wasn't exclusively that for the entire time. And there's like a fairly big team there. So we would move around the studio sometimes, and things would kind of be left half done and then picked up later. So it wasn't, but for the most part, I was sat in front of canvas, listening to podcasts. It was kind of like something of an ideal work tonight. I think for a lot of people, you're doing something that you're like good at, you're getting paid for. You don't have to think about it too much, really. And I get to listen to podcasts all day, which was great. I've listened to so many that I can't remember ones, and I don't really get the chance to anymore. And that was okay for 4 years.
Yeah. Which is a lot. And so you were doing that like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday?
Yeah, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And that got in the way of my art practice.
But that's quite a lot. I mean, that's like a pretty intensive amount of time just in a week to be painting.
Yeah.
Never mind across a 4-year period where like it's a 9 to 5 job, but you're sat in front of a canvas. And obviously you're not sat there like for the whole 8 hours, 9 hours painting probably.
No. But for the majority of it, or at least I was meant to be painting for the majority of it. Whether I got away with looking at
just staring and holding a brush.
Yeah, just holding it and falling asleep. No, I didn't do that. I was always a very good worker, a very efficient, good worker. But there was, it was quite intense. It was a very kind of chilled job, really. Yeah. But there was something about feeling like I could stay there forever and nothing would change. Like, my life would be the same, and there's it's such a privileged thing to say, but that was just, it became really unsatisfying. Like to be comfortable suddenly became unsatisfying, and I was in a position where I could kind of Maybe shake it up a bit.
I suppose also like the thing is the pay is probably good. It's quite stable because it's a technique orientated job, which is, you know, you're not in competition with, you know, a lot of people can paint very well, but it's not like a different kind of job where the skill level is very high. So you kind of, you know, like you said, your friend went for it and didn't get it. It seems like you have enough skill in the bank that they enjoy you staying there for, well, clearly a long enough time, for 4 years.
Yeah.
That your job is not like under threat compared to like a, you know, let's say a journalist job is like everyone can, you know, write better than you maybe. And
oh yeah, it wasn't very cutthroat. Like once you were there, you're kind of you were kind of there. It's sort of actually that it came and went. There's been a lot of changes over the years with with different things coming up, different like organisations of the business. So there has like, you know, so at points there have been times where, you know, you weren't sure whether your job was secure. And like a lot of jobs in the arts, and I think actually maybe more generally now, you start on like a 2-year contract, and then you're kind of like, well, we'll see. You know, you're not on a permanent contract, and that's quite difficult. But it was good, but there was limited. You know, I had limited patience after 4 years of doing the same thing and realizing that it came to the detriment of my own practice, because painting every day pretty much meant that I didn't want to paint or make artwork, whether painting or not. Like it was.
So was there times where you were making paintings during that time you were at Damien's, or did you just stop completely?
No, I did. I was making some work. I'm trying to remember if there was overlap with the show he did in Rogue. I don't think I was there then. No, I was at the art shop.
So the first show we did together was in January 2015.
God, that was mad. So long ago.
Which was like 6 months after we graduated, basically.
So that was when I had the studio, but then I wasn't working for Science Ltd. Then I was working in the art shop. So was I making work? I was trying to make work, but I wasn't making very good work. I wasn't making work that I was happy with. I wasn't making work that I felt precious about, like I felt that was important to me, or that I spent time with. It felt very like, I think that was something like a kind of like, not panic, it's a kind of panic to it. I wanted to make something that was really good. I was having real trouble doing it, and then I was getting disappointed with everything I was making, so it's kind of I didn't feel like I was developing like a practice. I felt like I kept dropping in and out, you know. But then I'd be in the studio and I'd try and make something, and then I'd have to work. Then the next day, maybe, you know, I'd go from work and then stay until 12 at night, like 3 or 4 nights a week, and then maybe at the weekend as well. And it was just not. It just wasn't sustainable. I was knackered, and I wasn't making anything good.
Because it's in some ways it sounds like as well, like you're painting 9 till 5 every day. You could kind of get like a bit of brain space to think about your own painting, but like I imagine it's not the case where it's sort of, you know, because you're probably thinking about specific technique of a certain part of the painting, how to blend this white with this grey or whatever. And that actually, even though it sounds like a kind of blissful job of just painting all day, it kind of doesn't like leave you enough brain space to think about your own work enough, like sustainably over like a, you know, you might need like a 2-hour thought period to think about a given piece that you want to make. Whereas because it's very technique orientated, and I suppose because it's also a high focus job, it's like it's high skill, but it's also high focus. You can't just like slap on any old black and hope for the best. And because it's like, I mean, did you feel a pressure as well that it was, you know, the sales prices, you know, you are responsible for the thing that gets sold and makes him an income that makes you the income, basically? No,
there was none of that. I really had a real kind of hands-up approach to it. You know, turned out, painted, and went home and didn't care about it. And that was what was quite nice. Not having to take work home with you or having to think about anything like that. It really was quite low pressure like that. And I think, you know, that's, you know, the virtue of the other people that worked there and some of the managers as well. They offered kind of a barrier between, you know, the the workers, I suppose, and then the people who are kind of more controlling the business, and Damien included. So it wasn't. I never felt that pressure to perform in that way.
Yeah.
But it was the case that making. You do think you'd be able to think about your own work in that space, but you don't have access. You don't have access to the things that you need to make the work. You can't necessarily do sketches or have ideas. No, not really.
One hand here, one hand there.
Yeah, you can't really do that. And I think there's also when you're having to be and look busy all the time, it means that you can't really afford that. I kind of settled into the idea that I can't make work now. I'm at work in that studio, so I need to pass that, put that over there, and then try and engage with it back when I can. But I wasn't able to do it until I left and I found more time.
Which is just kind of interesting, really, to spend 4 years somewhere artistic, but then feel artistically uninspired. Would you say, or just sort of just you don't have the brain space to kind of occupy a second realm?
Didn't have the brain space to think about what I wanted to. I think I didn't have the brain space to think about what to paint about or make art for. And then there was also thinking, what is my life? What am I interested in? What am I reading? What am I doing? And when you're working 9 to 5 every single day, that becomes limiting. I'm sure that loads of people are much better at kind of having that kind of split brain than I was, but I just couldn't, and I didn't feel like I was having any kind of life experience or finding anything that I was really engaging with, because I just simply didn't have the time. So the work that I was making was just limited by that, by not knowing what to make work about, because I was making work for someone else for 5 days of a week.
And I suppose the work is not about thinking about stuff, it's just about replicating a given a given picture or a given thing. So it's pure technique, no kind of thought about it. Whereas sometimes, maybe you can imagine for other artists where the artist assistants are maybe a bit more kind of fluid in their choices of what they can do. To they also maybe there's definitely some people who make decisions about an artist's work where you're not making any decisions apart from pure technique, to kind of get from one thing to the next, get from this picture to a painting.
I think there's definitely jobs out there which, and I've found this maybe since more with being an art technician, if you have, I found that if I had more of an active engagement in what has to happen during the day, then I'm just more alert. I'm more able to think through stuff outside of that space as well. Whereas if all the decisions are taken out of your hands, and you become something of an automaton, just producing, with the kind of mindlessly producing, then my brain kind of settled into that. And I think that's what started making me feel uncomfortable. The comfort was also the repetitiveness of it. The fact there was no no changes, no difference. Nothing wild would ever happen really.
So what was it? How long then from these kind of thoughts that you wanted to leave to then acting out on that decision? Because that's also I suppose just before you kind of, it's that's an interesting thing of you're in a job that I suppose some people think of as an ideal scenario. You're an artist, you could make work by yourself, you're not doing, and you're working for someone else and you're getting paid to do it. And I imagine it's semi-decent pay compared to other jobs. So then it's kind of an interesting decision to then step away from that, which is about taking control of your own life in a bit more of a valuable way.
So I think what happened was I was getting quite conscious of the fact that I missed learning, and because we did painting, there was there's obviously learning art practice there, but I never really had the unique experience where reading and theory and all this kind of stuff. I don't think that was really as much in in art school, like generally, there's not a huge amount of that, I think. I don't know. Do you
it's
disagree?
sort of like sweeping, like general
It's
art reading that anyone could probably pick up even outside of art school.
Yeah, so like help your practice, but it didn't feel substantial. Oh, I just wanted to go back to school basically, so I did.
Yeah.
So I'm still at the tail end of doing a master's part-time at Goldsmiths in Contemporary Art Theory. And that was the reason. So it wasn't so much that I wanted to leave Damien's, it was more that I got to the point where something else kind of got in the way. They were generous in letting me, initially when I started the course, take a day off for the course, but that was still too much for me to balance, doing a master's, and even if it's part-time, because I'm doing it part-time, to do a master's and to read and everything. And it kind of coincided with me wanting to change things up a bit, and I started contacting a few spaces to see if I can be an art technician, because there's more freelance opportunities there. I was also aware that if anything did happen to my work at the Damien studio, then there aren't that many art assistant positions, whatever that would be. There is not many like painting things. Really, I didn't feel like it was. It seems more attainable now that I'm out.
It might be, but it's not as visible,
So I started kind of contacting those places, and also prop making, kind of prop houses and general art tech work. And that was in, when was that? October 2009, so just before COVID. 19. So just before COVID kicked off.
Nice.
Yeah, which is a real. That was a doozy of a decision.
That's just a decision.
It was a decision that meant that suddenly, and unsurprisingly, there wasn't that much work.
Going on,
Come March, so I worked at Momart, which is an art technician and shippers kind of in the packing department for a good stint, for a good few months.
And so when you left as well, like, were you also imagining doing this MA and making work and bringing that back in, or was that like you just wanted to read and be educated and learn some more things?
I think read, be educated, and learn some more things, but also with the vision that it kind of inform my practice. Because I had started painting again just before then, but there was also a kind of financial decision involved in that, because art practice masters are generally 2 years or 3 years. 2 years actually is the standard, and they are slowly getting much more expensive as time goes on. and the arts masters, the master's student loan, which just came in 4 years ago maybe now, doesn't cover that much. I think the maximum you can take out is £10,000. And when a fine art master's at the RCA is £12,000 a year. Suddenly it's not covering stuff.
By a vast amount.
By quite an amount, and you have to survive in London the same.
But had you considered those fine art masters as well, or was that just sort of you just kind of casually looked at it and thought the price is too high, see you later?
I casually considered the price was too high. There was. I think there are more kind of like the cheaper ones, which are no worse. Like there's. The kind of money doesn't necessarily.
Bargain basement up in the north, MA.
No, I'm sure I didn't look at the north MAs, but because I'm familiar. I'm so south, so southern. But I did look at some, but that amount of money just felt like. I'm not sure what I would do with it, because I was also starting from ground zero again, like not necessarily having painted for a while. And the course at Goldsmiths just seemed interesting. It was really interesting. It was also, financially attainable. And if it was free, but like the RA, like I've applied to the RA before, and obviously didn't get, because I would be there.
Yeah, because I would be there and not here.
I'd be there and not here. But those are fantastic, and they're funded, and there's money there, and it takes kind of alleviates a lot of the pressure off of the artists, whatever.
I always wonder with those things if people go to those free ones because they're interesting or because they're free. So like,
or like,
do people want to go to the RA? Like, obviously people want to go to the RA because it's like a beautiful place where the studios are huge and bright and kind of, I imagine there's a lot of, workshop space to kind of build whatever you want. But then it's also like, are people going there because they want to go there because it's free and it's low risk? If they apply and they get in, cool, like it's free, I'm not paying anything, gonna get a free studio for a bit. I
don't know. I think I'm not sure, but I mean I can only speak from my experience. Was that I think it's a great school. They take great students, and it has because of the way it's funded, it is maybe more of a, I want to kind of like say this without slating or like other masters, but more of a supportive environment. Because you like the ratio of students to tutors is so high. Like,
I suppose the question is kind of like, is if all the MAs were free, or if they were all paid for at the same price, then it's like, what is your choice? Like, where would you go from there?
If they were all free, then I wouldn't know where I would go. I think because the financial decision stopped me looking. You don't want to look too much at something you don't feel like you can never have. The RA excluded obviously because it has got the kind of financial support there. But RCA I had to write it off straight away. I would have considered other ones. I've really also settled on this. I really liked the sound of the Contemporary Art Theory course. The course, the Contemporary Art Theory course, has been fantastically interesting and great. The students are great. The engagement's great. I think it's been drastically different from what it could have been because of COVID. So the first year was more or less as kind of it should have been, but towards the tail end, then it really kicked off here and we had our first lockdown. And since then I haven't been in physical space with other people or with the lecturers. So the course this year was completely online, which just changes the dynamic hugely. It's still been really excellent and fun. But it's just so different not having people there with
because you wanted discussions and you didn't just want to read, you wanted discussions and conversations about such reading and
so we'll do kind of internet video calls for seminars and stuff, but it's just a different kind of environment when you're looking at people on screen. And there's the loss of that community, and I'm it's probably the same across a lot of university courses at the moment or over the last year. The loss of that sense of being somewhere, with other people and meeting other people. And it feels quite at a distance. When it's all done on taught through the internet. So at some point we'll probably all meet up eventually.
Do you feel like you've lost what could have been a great opportunity, or is that?
I think so. I think not so much great opportunity, just lost maybe that there's something about the connectivity and the practicalities of things like going to the library was a lot more difficult. Taking out books was slightly more difficult. The university did as much as it could, and my lecturer this year, Simon O'Sullivan, did a fantastic job of providing us with the reading. Which was incredible. So I've got kind of a library of books. I said to him, a library of books I wanted to read, all in PDF, because he's been kind of providing them for us, which was fantastic.
Not the best. If you don't have the right hardware, it's not the best format to read. If you don't have a tablet, when people send me PDFs to read, I've only got a laptop. It's a very different experience where I just can't read it.
No, I find it really difficult to read on a screen. My dad gave me this old I can't remember if it's like a Kindle or a Fire or something, like an e-reader. And it's good, but I haven't kind of got to grips with it. It's all so reading on a screen has been quite difficult. I don't know. It's worked, and for the best part, it's been okay. But when you're writing essays or trying to learn about stuff, and have these conversations with people, so you can kind of form ideas, it's difficult when you have to organize it through the internet, through text, like messaging groups and stuff like that.
And it kind of puts more like work on the job of like being educated. It's like you've got to be the sort of worker turning up to the like digital office to kind of chat, whereas it can be more fluid and kind of less, you feel like you have to engage less in a lecture hall, and not like you don't want to engage, but more like you can relax into the conversations or the things that are going on, but don't have to be like I found with online learning, it's quite like you're really intensely focusing, and you feel like you can't leave the route, like leave the digital room or leave your own room to go to the toilet sometimes, or I don't know.
I agree. I think the same. I think COVID and just the pandemic and the reshuffle of the educational system that's had to happen around that has highlighted maybe it's obscured quite a few things because you cannot be present and active in the space. So when my first year of being at Goldsmiths and this year, and I think like it will be the case onwards as well, the lecturers have been on strike on and off for various reasons, but for changes to their contracts. I'm not going to say, I can't remember exactly why, I should know. I can't remember exactly why, so I'm not going to kind of elaborate too much more. But in the first year, when we could go and show support and be at the picket line, that felt like there was a community, and you can understand, and you had people speaking to you about why people were on strike and be kind of part of that, that movement. Whereas this year, when they were going on strike, it just out of the blue, it just felt so distant. I didn't even know it was happening until quite late, and that's partly because whilst we have the image of the internet and kind of video communication or whatever being speeding up the process and kind of making communication easier, I think actually it obscures quite a lot of communication that is done predominantly on the ground amongst the people that are working there, or the workers and the lecturers and the students. I think that's also kind of been a noticeable change.
So then I suppose like from that though is you get more time at home, and so do you start painting more?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. In combination with doing my masters, and the masters was only kind of low engagement hours, so 1 day a week, and then the rest is your own learning time. That in combination with not really having any work definitely gave me more time. Definitely gave me a lot more time. So for the first couple of months of the lockdown, no work at all, but I was concentrating on an essay that I had to do. And then coming out of that, trying to pick up little bits of work here and there, and the places that I did find, I got to the point where I wasn't getting anywhere with applications for things, so I started calling out galleries and started working for a few galleries I still work at now, and they've all been like fantastically helpful and generous over like COVID in trying to find work for people when maybe actually there wasn't necessarily much to do, but they've been getting people in, which has been really appreciated. But it's meant that, so whilst my income has taken a dramatic fall, I'm fine. I can, if I can pay rent and bills, and then make artwork, I'm okay. And also, I should say that I'm not a kind of at end of bank balance kind of thing. I've got savings from when I worked, so it's I'm not a super up against it. I think so, you know, some people have a lot more freedom to kind of make artwork than others. I think it's
it's definitely a thing.
A financial thing for a lot of people, I think. So I found myself with a lot more time. Found myself with a lot more space to think, and with the space to read as well. So that's definitely meant that I've been able to continue my practice. Although I suppose I don't want to say start it up again. I feel like it was always there, but continue it.
So then what, like, did you start, because I know like a few people just sort of thought like COVID might pass quickly, and so they weren't getting into like a new routine of like, this is lockdown, or this is like a new dimension of my reality now, so I'll start a different trajectory of my practice. Did you have like a couple of months delay and then start, or did you start immediately and kind of think, well, this might be a while, so I might just kind of start making a body of work? Or, as in like
future.
I think because people had different like dimensions of like time about how long it would be, and there was like either optimism or pessimism about how long this will last. And I think some people thought, it'd just be a couple of months, so didn't necessarily change their reality. Whereas some people kind of, I suppose it depends on how your kind of work, like how each individual's work kind of change. So if you're like going to university and then you have to go online, you feel more like things have been cut short. Whereas maybe if you're a key worker who's still going to work, you don't feel your reality's changed. So you're kind of, you won't be making work.
What did I do? I think because I found myself quite like occupied. I'm quite good at like filling time with stuff. So I think I tried to take on loads of little projects, which weren't necessarily all like artwork. I did like hobby stuff or website things or something, or just like learning stuff. Like I say, I built a computer with my friend, like stuff like that. You know, distractions. Because my old computer blew up. I'm not just like in the market for just like making computers. This is also before the big GPU shortage of 2020. What did I do? I already been painting a little bit. I tried to dedicate tried to dedicate more time to making work, but it was just a lot more relaxed. I don't necessarily like the idea of just sitting in a studio but I don't want to replicate the same things I didn't like about working at Science Ltd. Because there's no point. If I'm not enjoying it, then there's no point in necessarily doing it. But I did find myself experimenting with like new things. So painting, but also doing like some of my paintings work from like digital 3D models that I make, and so doing that and having also like a studio in the computer, I suppose, as well, which is a lot cheaper. And it's like, for me, the kind of computer space is one that's like always flexible. Is maybe where a lot of like the like creative kind of process, kind of mixing up kind of stuff can happen, experimenting with new ideas, and it's just the speed of chopping and changing. Whereas some people, prefer the concept, like starting with like their initial idea, might make stuff with their hands. I tend to make some dodgy models on the computer and then mess around with them
gradually better.
And they get gradually better. I would kind of do like sketchbook stuff really vaguely, and then we'll kind of go from there, like computer-based kind of stuff.
And then I suppose with the painting as well, though, so for the stuff in this show, some of the paintings, you've definitely developed a technique that's like probably 100 times better than what I saw at uni. And so not that it was bad at uni, but as in like, it's
I didn't
like
paint it much, but yeah.
But like what I'm talking about from first year really, but as in like, so clearly like a technique has been like taken through from when you're working at Science Ltd and applied to that, and then the digital render stuff, you've been given more time to kind of, or you've gained more time to kind of develop your skills in making renders. But I also remember you making renders quite a while ago.
Yeah, on my 2009 MacBook Pro, just like crunching through, like, that thing lasted until last year, like until I bought my new computer. Yeah, that thing, I loved it. Never broke until the hard drive went, but that was an absolute like trooper. I was doing kind of 3D digital stuff on there as well, like really early on. But so yeah, for this show, like technique wise, the technique, I think because it becomes so ingrained, I was doing the same kind of style of painting kind of before, but there's like a specific way of painting that we kind of like did at Science Ltd, and it's so ingrained, like it is part of like just the movement of my painting now. I can't necessarily get rid of it. And so in a different way to the kind of big broad strokes of kind of paint, it's very flat and very kind of blended and blushed in. I do kind of liken it to makeup application, you know, the kind of the kind of blushing,
it's like a
blending of
smoothing
colours.
of everything.
Yeah, kind of blend.
Like it doesn't have either texture nor kind of hand.
It's kind
like,
of
nor like you can probably not even tell if you just saw them as an image. They were painted. They kind of look like renders in and of themselves. That are kind of fuzzy and kind of like I look at them and sort of think of like they're like those velvet sort of like printed pictures that you might get, because they look so like they look fluffy, but they like look realistic.
So these ones are done on like marine board, and they started off as 3D models, 3D renders of ostensibly like plants, of like sections of plants. I wanted to make them look like what was it, kind of microscopic kind of little images of like the details of plants, and then the idea being that so we'll go back to kind of when I started making these paintings, and this was around the same time that he contacted me to maybe do this show, and I was working around this idea of a kind of a fiction where hidden in the kind of surface of plants are these like messages from ourselves, kind of to ourselves, into the future. So each of them has kind of words like hidden, kind of woven into them, hidden in there, and so making those on the computer and then going through the process of painting them and deciding not to have them as prints either. I think generally with this, like I think also it's kind of throughout the show, there's a lot of things that are or could have been just like flat prints, even you know the kind of drawings that are behind us and the paintings as well. But I really like the physicality, or like the process of making something by hand as well, even if there's a lot of like shifting about whether it's whether it's a print or whether it's a painting, and where the kind of like line of that really happens. But also I think with printing, the reason I painted these and didn't print them is because I think with print, it kind of, especially if it's like a print of a 3D model, it immediately kind of gives it away as a 3D model. You can see where it is. You see all the kind of like artifacts of the model. And while that's kind of, that's
and it has a
fine.
specific like aesthetic of like a 3D model looks a certain way, smooth like surfaces, everything's got like specific lighting because it's, they're lit in a 3D model scenario, and everything is slightly unbelievable.
Yeah, I think because this kind of this fiction idea of these little messages kind of expanded outward, but in part of that is also this, this the kind of real, not real of painting, and it kind of obscures the model, or like the kind of reference model that it comes from, so it's a step away, and I felt kind of moved it a little bit away from being just quite like made this printed this, that it's more kind of hazy where the boundary is of it. So yeah, that's those paintings.
So we got in this show we've got 4 paintings which are these kind of smallish, black and white, hyper-realistic, planty / wordy things. That's a terrible description.
I'll deal with that. That's
Or something I could, we could think about something better. And then we've got, so they're on metal structures, and then we've got these wall drawings which are behind us and all around us, and they're more kind of like plastery, sculptor mold, cast objects of plant forms or biological forms, as you kind of described it to me. So what was the kind of, so I suppose like I only asked you to do the show like 3 or 4 months ago, so there's not a lot of thought time to kind of think about that. But like, what was the thought process in terms of like, because I know you sort of had some of the paintings hanging around already, maybe that were sort of from, the last year or so. So then what was the thought process of like, from these things that I have to move to a full show?
Yeah, so I think when you contacted me, I actually only had one of these small paintings done. And yeah, I was working with this idea of, as I said, this like fiction where plants are kind of modified so that they're kind of like time capsules of messages into the future. And I think it's because of this quite, exceptional like human situation where we can kind of perceive the changes in climate change and everything else that's happening. And in that sense, we're kind of exceptional. We acknowledge what's happening or what we're going through, and have visions of what it could be to go through that or to go beyond it, but never quite approach it. I feel like there's a lot of there's a resistance about this idea that it will either the climate change will just start, and then it'll be the catastrophic end of the world that will just happen, and not the idea that we're living through it now, and that it kind of like is a momentum that's already kind of happened. And so I was, trying to think about how we consider that future, like what is that future, what are the messages, if we could send messages to people, to whatever exists in the future, like whatever is left or still kind of thriving post big changes. What kind of messages do we have for those people, those things? Why do we have messages for those kind of things, and what it is to imagine the future at the moment? There's something of a stopping point that happens with climate change, or like the visions of the future have kind of been limited, I suppose. It's not Jetsons and I don't know, Star Wars. It's the road, or I don't know, to enter dystopic kind of scenario here. And I think so when I was working through this this idea, and it's kind of expanded from the paintings outwards, I was thinking more, or at least like the drawings, or the banners that we've got with kind of writing, kind of smoke message writing on them. I wanted to kind of have a more like generous, still like lamenting like change, but kind of a more generous idea that that will be going, like the banners say, we'll go together. It's like the changes that will happen are going to be ones where we are all kind of embroiled in that together, and it's something that is maybe more accepting. It's kind of a sad acceptance of what could happen, but not horrific, and not necessarily reactive against, more embracing maybe.
Yeah.
Not that climate change and all that kind of thing is a good thing, but I think there's an inevitability about it, which I think should encourage more of a togetherness than like a kind of trying to stop it.
Yeah.
Stopping seems kind of impossible. And I know some of this idea was, I don't know if you've read it, Staying with the Trouble by Donna Haraway. So there's kind of a...
This is what you're reading and the cause comes in probably with that.
That's where my reading of the cause comes in. That was definitely... definitely like kind of ethos that kind of runs through the work.
So I suppose the other thing then about the show is that because we're filming everything rather than having people come in the space, like how did that affect how you then thought about what the show could be? Because I suppose you're also making paintings so people can, like you're making paintings before I asked you for a show so people can see them, and then someone asks you for a show where no one's going to see them but we're going to film them. Yeah. How did that affect your kind of decision making about making a show?
Yeah, it definitely did, but not as much. Like I haven't necessarily tried to completely reformat what an exhibition can be in light of that. I think partly that was a time thing to some extent. Yeah. Because there was like I think really early on I was like, oh yeah, I can kind of make some like VR scenario, or like I can do some like 3D models I've got like claws, and we can like mess around and stuff, and I think that would be cool, but then practicalities of that would maybe go in the way. So how has it changed it? It's changed it in various ways. I think one of the biggest things that kind of changed it for me was also the distance, because me being in London, you being up here, and how to plan a show from a distance. But I suppose that's not exceptional to like this space or this project specifically. But I found that doing 3D renders, 3D models of the space, and then trying to figure it out from there was made it a lot easier to envisage what it's going to look like. But I suppose one of the biggest changes was when we were setting up, and you had I came with the renders, but then you were pointing out quite rightly that the eye of the viewer is not going to be at eye height. So obviously when I'm hanging stuff for galleries and whatever, standard eye height's about 150. And then, but when it's the camera that everything's kind of getting seen through, that drops to 130 or 120. So everything's slightly lower. Yeah. But then at the same time, we've got some things that are taller so that they can be seen through. And I think what the camera does, because everything becomes, this flat plane that's kind of sucked into the camera. Yeah,
everything's sort of equal when we're filming. It's like the walls and the ceilings and the height of the objects is kind of, it can be equal, but it also doesn't matter what the height is, because the camera can move to a point where your eyes don't move to unless you're jumping around in a gallery space. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that changes it. And then there's we've got coal, lumpwood charcoal running across the space, which you could have that in a normal exhibition, but
someone would stand on it.
Someone would stand on it, or someone would be getting really close.
We've all been to those openings where
oh my god,
you've cringed at the thought of someone breaking something.
Yeah, I mean, this is just lumpwood charcoal. But if it was like if I'd cast each one out of ceramic or something, or just having stuff on the floor is always a bit of a decision when you're actually having the public coming to a show. But yeah, so we've got the kind of charcoal lines that run around, which initially were going to be maybe more like puddles. So we filled one in at one point, and I wasn't too sure about it. But I suppose we've been going on walks, haven't we? Going on walks, and I've been seeing the dry stone walls, and actually so that's what's kind of meant that they're more like barriers, or like little walls between spaces, little islands, and that affects how I suppose you're going to move through the space with the camera.
But and that's also the kind of decision where you've not made artwork with like people walking through it in mind, because no one's walking through it apart from me, and hopefully I won't stand it and stuff. But yeah, it has been like a case of, I suppose the show is more dense than what you would have in like a normal show, because of the nature of one person's coming in maximum all the time.
Yeah, I think so, and just how everything's arranged, you can, because you don't necessarily have to account for multiple people looking at from multiple different angles. I know the camera will move around, but you have control over the view.
Yeah.
You know, like complete curatorial control over how everything's seen.
Yeah.
Which is quite exceptional, really. And I know there's a lot of like, particularly over the pandemic, art galleries have been doing like internet exhibitions and stuff, and showing works like around the space. But that's it. For a lot of those, it's still kind of sticking to the format of the square space.
Yeah, well, often it's like a standard exhibition put online, rather than this is like making an exhibition to film, which I think is a different thing to being like online, because I don't like to consider it as like an online gallery, but more like we're trying to document everything and make an exhibition that is filmed, which is very different than making an online exhibition, which looks like a physical exhibition but is in like a VR space or is online through the pictures, but really probably gives you less of an interesting like look into an exhibition than what you would see physically.
Yeah, it's the format is completely different. You know, your first and foremost, the format is that the camera and of the exhibition kind of existing in this camera space, or in the internet space, where which is different, because this exhibition hasn't necessarily broken the kind of mold of exhibitions. This could be a space where people come in, but I'm sure, as you know, the project kind of develops. Artists might play more with the format than I have, but I think it's really interesting to see what happens when you completely take away. It's not so much taking away the public. I think the public are always and should always be involved, but taking away the physical presence of just other people in the space. It's interesting, and it's one of those where it's an interesting, because it kind of plays around with the hierarchies of like who is in control, and ultimately this means that you're in control of like the editorial, the curation of it and the documentation, with some help from me. But it does put you in a position where you're in control of the archive. Yeah,
and more in control of like everything is viewed specifically, and even if it's like a close-up view or a far-away view, those things are specific rather than general. Yeah. So it kind of doesn't, like, you can hide things as well as show things. And if the way things are hung, like, you know, you don't see around the back of things necessarily if you don't want to show that, or I don't know, whatever, like parts of bolts that you would care about in a gallery space, because you know people look at everything, and sometimes too much, and so, but now it's like it doesn't really matter, because we just don't show certain things if it doesn't, if it's not like visually interesting to the point of like high engagement online, and B, because there's only a limited amount of things you can show in a sort of video format for 2-3 minutes.
No, it's interesting. Do you feel that pressure though, that kind of the weight of the documentation in your hands, or maybe not?
I feel like I've always felt that, because the things always only ever last as documentation. And I suppose the reason I moved to video is because the photos are kind of highly unrealistic, and it's like, you know, you might have 20 shots for a given show. It doesn't really it shows very limited amount of things in that show. You'll get like the 4 corners of like a wide angle, a couple of close-ups, but actually a lot of stuff is missing, and the missing thing is like how the things link together. So the reason I wanted to like start filming shows like a few years back is because you're always missing that the way you could move from one to the next, or how things, sometimes you'll see shows online where there's like a picture of one room and then it looks like it's another room, but maybe it's just the opposite end of the room, but you don't have that connection between one picture and the next. And so the film gives you that connection of like how it moves around, which I think is always a problem, because it's like people know there's like a deception to the image, like a still image, and use it to their advantage. Whereas with the film, there's more exposure, but also you can then control, like, I suppose like then you can control the entertainment of like the show. It's like it becomes an entertaining product rather than an image is kind of like a document of an entertaining product.
Because this can't be accessible to the public, the video becomes the product itself.
Yeah.
Which is, because it is interesting. I think what I find most interesting is that it's not just a video of the exhibition, because this won't just exist as, this conversation and just the exhibition.
Yeah.
You've got the videos of the installation, which, I've been saying to you is a really interesting way of taking away the illusion of this pristine art kind of image that things just happen and just appear, and the production behind it just gets completely obfuscated behind the white wall, the kind of like white cube scenario, because I think that's quite powerful to kind of take away that illusion and have it as documentation of like how we're setting up the show and the decisions that have to be made and the the physical aspect of it, and of time passing. That
Stuff took time to make.
Stuff took time to make.
And it
stuff
didn't
took time to
just pop up.
install. Stuff takes time to document and film, to consider, and it isn't just the case that it just appears. But I think everyone knows, it doesn't just appear, but it's presented as if it does.
But I think people, and I think it's especially like there's like a hiddenness of like the JPEG allows for a kind of like the image allows for a kind of really specific view of a specific show, and then also because those things are like high engagement on specific social media platforms, people want to get to that point to kind of continually engage rather than have the kind of messy stuff that no one really cares about, like looking at or kind of engaging with. I suppose the other thing as well is that it's kind of like it also highlights the limited amount of people and kind of stuff that happens within an artist-led space, that it's not in the kind of same like processes as a kind of Science Ltd sort of production, where it is just two people working on something that's very specific and takes quite a lot of time and physical energy as well as like mental energy to kind of work out not only where things go and how things are built, but the kind of all the stuff in between that. I think it does extend like from this and also to science, and generally across like the arts there is like this hiddenness to the production of art, to who's making it, to how it's made, and how it moves about the world, who it's owned by, where it's stored. It is all kind of hidden, kind of veiled behind stuff. I think going back to the kind of making, kind of what you're saying about making for the JPEG to some extent, and what people like to see. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure if I like it, but I think it's interesting how you do feel like sometimes artwork is made for the JPEG, for the Instagram post, for the engagement. I think we were talking the other day about paintings which at least on Instagram look incredibly smooth. And they look real bad in real life.
And up close, it's really like not smooth, because you can hide a lot, as you're saying, you can hide a lot behind the JPEG. And I mean, does it matter like what is I wouldn't necessarily say that the physical object is more like important than the digital version of it at all, but I think they function on very different, like wavelengths, really, and particularly if it's kind of through a filter of something like a, you know, multinational corporation like Facebook or Instagram, and how the algorithms work and why certain images get liked and certain ones don't.
And then who plays that game to kind of
overly
engage
who plays
in that?
into that, and how does that change what artwork ends up being and how it gets made. That's interesting to observe. As someone who doesn't really use Instagram
not
that
make
much.
necessarily.
Not make. No, I think this is why, because there was conversations about. So some of the pieces in this show are originally they're digital models, which have then been printed onto plaster. And when we were first kind of having conversations, like, because I did want them in the space somehow, but how do you bring into a space something that's so flat without, you can make something that looks like it, that's physical. You could 3D print it or something, but I wanted to make it more than just the print, more than just like a flat print, because there's something about that physicality, about the making, and about the process of, for me anyway, working with my hands to bring something, out of it. That's really important to me, because otherwise I would just be getting everything printed. But it seems to skip a step, even though in the digital space, in the computer space, that's where a lot of the creativity happens. I feel like there's something about being physically involved which works that transition between like the digital space and the real space. For me, it needs to be like a physical thing. So a lot of the kind of elements of this exhibition have a kind of I think Ella was saying like a kind of like a science fiction comic book-ish kind of flatness element to it, but everything's been made done physically, not so much
knowing
printed.
that it would be videoed and there's not just like a one dimension to the shot,
because it
can move around.
Or it would seem like an unnecessary middle step if you were filming something which was digital, going digital to digital. I think that middle, the exhibition is analog sandwiched between two bits of digital media, which is interesting. It makes it kind of like fleeting space, which is, this has happened, this show has existed, but it will permanently exist on either sides of it. The digital stuff that I made on the computer beforehand and the digital stuff that kind of gets made afterwards, and they kind of spread off in different directions from this one analog moment.
Because I suppose the thing about filming the shows is that it is, even though it is digital, it requires a physical space to do it. And I think it's the importance of making physical objects that look like as attainably physical as like a really beautiful like documentary where you can see the pores on someone's face and you can understand the emotions, and then it has that physicalness, but it just happens to be on a screen that you're witnessing it. But you kind of hopefully forget that those things, you forget about the pixels when you're looking at something that's like physical and has grain and texture and detail to it. Whereas if you had a digital thing in here that looked flat, it would kind of lose the point, I don't know, or like it ruins the kind of, you're trying to create an illusion of a physical space and it being like this thing, this kind of piece of entertainment that you're kind of watching for a moment in time.
How have you found it setting up? Because obviously this is, we haven't spoken about it, but this is like the guinea pig
option moment.
I'm the guinea pig to some extent, and how do you want to talk about that, like what your thoughts for the concept or for why you started doing this, and then how you came about like asking me to do it, and then how you found it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for me it was like the primary reason was to gain some more time and freedom away from like running a gallery space where a lot of like there's a lot of wasted time and a lot of wasted energy. And then I've always enjoyed the filming of the exhibitions more than taking pictures. And I find showing friends like a film of a show we've done is more like a realistic way to explain what I've done, rather than if you just show them a couple of pictures, they'll disengage quite quickly. So then it was like, well, the filming is an engaging like medium to kind of explain these shows, and I really enjoyed the filming of it. And then the other thing is got sort of like a location thing of where it might not be as possible anymore to exist in city centre spaces where an arts-led space can be within a sort of like the range of like, you know, a public to travel to near a train station or near something that's accessible. And if you are, you need to finance that with a high amount of kind of backing and fund that. So it's like a dual thing. And then, so then there was like, well, if you had it on film, you could move the locations to somewhere it doesn't matter if people could get to. And then if you remove the public, you change how a show can be built. And then if you document all the kind of processes in between the show or like before the show, you gain more publicness to it, is what I hope or envisage, or at least you gain more honesty to what's happened. So even if it's disengaging and boring, at least you've kind of explained every moment of why you've got up to this point. And for me, I think I always used to find it interesting when I was a kid, like watching documentaries of behind the scenes artists making stuff in their studio, more than like seeing their painting in the Tate. Their painting in the Tate was kind of like ruined the mystery of it for me, whereas that like watching the documentary of them making something and the kind of the tragedy and sort of like excitement of doing things and things not working out, or things being like breaking, or relationships breaking down, is more interesting and human than seeing like a perfect image on a perfect wall that's where the environment is totally controlled. So I suppose that was a kind of reason of like wanting to kind of do that, like take that angle of making it more human, to kind of explain how a gallery can run, or like a gallery is, and the humanness behind a gallery. Because I suppose a lot of people hide behind the image in their work, knowing it has a higher engagement than the kind of messy humanness that is not always like visually engaging or interesting necessarily. It's just stuff that happens. And sometimes, but I suppose like often I found that when we were doing shows in the past and didn't film them, the stuff that I found most interesting was the stuff before the exhibition, that we'd like how we made stuff, and some of the things that like didn't work out as planned, and then you kind of forget how you got to that final point of it being an exhibition. It was like, well, this wasn't the plan, but we spent 2 weeks moving around in like different forms and found this thing, and I don't even know why we've made all this stuff. But maybe if you look back at it, you could understand the trajectory where the narrative is a bit clearer. So I suppose it was that, and then I suppose in working with you was just something like I wanted to work with someone who I didn't want the challenges of working with someone new, and that kind of, I don't know, that sort of like you want to care for them and kind of think about what they're doing and how they're making an exhibition. You don't want to put an extra pressure on them to be like, we're filming stuff, but I don't know how I'm going to film this, and I don't really know what the end product is. And to do that with someone who you know and have worked with on other exhibitions in the past alleviates some of that kind of pressure or stress of messing up along the way if what you're doing is not right, or if it's not. And also that you can have conversations about feeling like, are you comfortable with filming this, or are we okay recording this, do you want this in, so that you can understand a bit in the future how comfortable other people feel about these things, where sometimes if you know someone less, you're less likely to feel comfortable talking about those things. And then that then helps to kind of form an idea of if this format works. And I suppose sort of, like for me at the end of the day, it's an experiment. It's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily have to sustain itself for 5 years. It's just a thing I wanted to try out because I felt it might be an interesting way to do exhibitions. But I'm not precious in the way of thinking, this is my career for the next 10 years and I'm going to be a YouTube star who like have the biggest gallery in the world, but more like, oh, well, I just want to try this because I think it might be an interesting way, in the same way that started out by trying making films and then enjoyed it more than taking pictures of the shows, and so would then put more effort and emphasis on making the films rather. Like I'd still take the photos, but I kind of got into a rhythm of, like you were saying with the paintings, at Damien's, where it's like you just get into the rhythm and it doesn't feel effort. Taking the photos of the exhibition where I knew in like the last space specifically where all the good shots, the good angles were, became to like I could do it in like an hour and run around and sort of like, this is the shot, you know, and sometimes I'd even have markers on the floor where I knew where, you know, to go to get the shot of the thing, or you just know it's like the long shot across the gallery right down the middle is the big hitter. So make sure that's right. So, but then the films were like, well, how do I film this if it's like for some shows where the objects weren't like in good places to film, or it was kind of like a big thing where it's like, how do you get this on camera as an interesting like dynamic shot?
It's also the editing as well, because it's now you've not just got the camera to worry about just for documentary purposes. Now you're trying to think about, particularly if it's kind of going to go on to more like social, like sharing like YouTube or the rest of kind of video hosting things, about how the editing kind of contributes to engagement and also how people see it.
15-minute gallery like exhibition views that are slightly slow and slightly boring, and because I suppose at the end of the day you want someone to watch it, but you also want someone to stay and watch the whole thing, and that's a very different thing to just documenting, where documenting is about capturing the thing that happens, and it doesn't really matter what the engagement is, because a document is just sort of like, you know, it might be personal, it might go out, you might show it to people a bit later on, but it doesn't have to kind of hold people on a certain website for 5-6 minutes. Whereas this kind of format for me is about kind of highly engaging content, which maybe changes then how you curate stuff, but is also about like trying to make exhibitions that are entertaining rather than trying to make, I don't know, like there's various types of exhibitions you could make, but I don't think this format is then suited to making conceptual exhibitions that, you know, like an empty gallery where the public can't enter and it's like a concept. It's like, that's not visually interesting for a YouTube channel. And it is about the visual entertainment of it, and it is about making like highly impactful, colourful, physical, textural, dramatic work that kind of has lots of different things in it, so that you stay and watch the whole thing rather than it is one thing, or it has a singular texture or a singular type of work. Like it's just all concrete and it's all flat and there's nothing. After 30 seconds you're bored of looking at it. So yeah, so I suppose there's a lot of things to it that is a challenge to kind of think about, and also it's not solved by just doing one show with you, but it's also a way to experiment with someone who I knew had like a practice that was both painting and conceptual and physical and sculptural, and would also be open to kind of, well, we could talk about things because we're friends and we could understand what is filmed and how things are filmed, and then I can ask questions later on about what is edited, or do we want this in, or is this all kind of crap, basically? So,
yeah, exactly.
Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, drop a squid emoji in the comments. And if you haven't made it this far, and if you didn't make it this far, then you'll never see this.